record on this computer. Okay. All right, welcome everybody. I'm glad you could make it for our first little virtual foray. So basically what I've saved the images as with the name of whoever submitted it and then numerically ordered the mushrooms. So these are going to come over just in alphabetical by the person's name, whoever submitted them. And feel free to ask questions, et cetera, et cetera. And let me share my screen. Okay. So do you guys see that?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Let me see if I can figure out how to make this. Sorry, I'm on a learning curve here. I'm not used to hosting these things, and I'll just leave it to the side here. Okay. So the first one here, we got.
Can you make that full screen?
Oh, I thought I just did. It's full screen on my computer.
It's full screen, but a tile, so we're not seeing one individual photo.
You know what it might be is on share screen, you might have to, like, it might show you the two different options of the full screen versus the
photo app. I hope this photo app works.
Yeah, you might need to do screen share and select the photo.
They did not, that was not.
If you select desktop, it'll focus on whatever you have in front, usually.
Mitch,
Photos.
Mitch, I was having the same problem as how to get pictures up on the full screen. Oh, great.
There we go.
Now I can't see anything. I only see the picture, so I don't see any of you. So anyway, so this was submitted. You can see it has a brown stipe. It has a brown cap. I'm going to zoom in here, and do you see that right there? This is a great example of what they call reticulation. And you'll notice that the raised portions are brown. So there's quite a few different types of bolites. You've got Boletus tends to have kind of like olive spores. The pores tend to turn a yellowish color. There's Tilopolis that tends to have pinkish spores and it turns the pore layer that color. You've got Xanthoconium that goes like a rusty spore. So depending on how the pore layer starts changing, that can kind of help lead you to where you think you're going. Now this one kind of looks like it's yellow, but considering this has a brown reticulation, so that means that the raised portion is the dark part. That leads me quickly to Tilopolis Felias by looking at this mushroom. This is what they call the bitter bolete. Okay, I don't know what's happening here.
Mitch, one of the bitter bolites?
One of the bitter bolete. This is the one they call the bitter bolete. There are others, but Felias is like the classic standard example of the bitter boletes. That tends to be brown cap, that brown reticulation. Like if you think you found a Boletus edulis and you're like, oh yes, look at the reticulation all over the stem. And you look at it and that reticulation is, the raised portions are brown, you probably have this. So I'm not saying it can look exactly like an edulis, but that's definitely a good clue.
So isn't Tilopolis Felias, isn't the pore layer kind of pinkish though? And that doesn't.
It usually is. It
color
usually is
to me.
sort of pinkish. That being said, you know, depending on the conditions, like if maybe the spores didn't start maturing properly and it started drying out, and so you might get a yellowish coloration or brownish coloration, you get staining and things like that. So typically a Tilopolis would have pinkish underside, purplish pinkish underside to it. Any other questions about that one? Okay. Anybody want to venture a guess at this one? I think we saw this at the ID meeting during the normal meeting.
Amanita Jacksoni Eye?
That is probably what this is. You can see it's got this, the radial lines due to the gills kind of showing through on the top of the cap. Got this thick membranous vulva cup. It's kind of oversaturated, but it looks like the stipe is a yellow color, and there's no remnants of the partial veil on the cap. So there's a lot of other ones that kind of look like this, but they tend to usually have cap remnants on the top. Of course, if it's raining, they could get washed off and such. But this one, due to the pretty membranous vulva sac, it pops right through and doesn't leave any portions.
This is April. I found a ton of them, and I made very certain of my identification, but they did go into an omelet. So.
Really, what'd you think?
I didn't like the texture so much. Yeah, I don't know. There was something about the texture that, I mean, I didn't hate it, but yeah, the flavor just was sort of neutral.
Yeah, that I find a lot of these things that, you know, can have not much flavor, so edible but not necessarily choice.
I've heard that the European version, the Amanita, the Caesar's mushroom, is much tastier than the Jacksoni Eye.
I've heard the same.
But I haven't had either, so I don't know.
I confirm what you just said, Carla. It's very tasty. Yeah. Oh, wait. I'm not. Yeah, it is very, the Amanita caesarea is really tasty.
Cool.
You're talking about the European
The
one.
European, yeah, I had it in
Right.
Europe. Yes. Do
Yeah.
we have this one here? The caesarea?
Caesarea, no, we don't.
Okay.
That's
This
the
is-
American Caesar. It's Jacksoni Eye. And there's a couple of other ones. One has like a brownish cap. So instead of this like orangey red, it's brown. Or not brown, but it's got more brownish tones and yellows in it.
Mitch, the most common confusion with that would be the Parsivulvata, I think.
Right.
And Parsivulvata will not have a big vulva at the bottom, and it will have, unless it's washed off, universal veil on the top.
Remnants,
Tends
yes.
not to happen on the Jacksoni Eye. Do you know whether Parsivulvata is reputed to be poisonous if you make a mistake?
So, well, Parsivulvata has no veil, partial veil. So, but Flavoconia does have a partial veil. And I believe there's a frosty eye, one of those, that they look very similar. But it's not reported as edible, but I have had calls from the Poison Center, and I told them, you know, this is so close to the Jacksoni Eye. I think people might have eaten Jacksoni Eye on accident. And I think we would have been reports of people getting sick or something from them making that mistake. So I wouldn't recommend eating it, but it may not be.
I had Jacksoni Eye once just to try it and decided it wasn't worth the risks.
Right? All right, so I already moved on to this guy. Now, typically this orange coloration is more on the cap surface than it is on the stipe there. But it can occur on the stipe. So you can see this is obviously a bolete, right? So it's got the pore layer. This is one they call the painted bolete. So this is Tilopolis Felias. It's reported to be edible, but every time I've ever found one and I've given it a little nibble, it's been kind of bitter and kind of funny tasting. So I've never tried eating it.
I agree. I've tried it several times. It says they can vary, and I've never found a really good one.
So it's fairly common, and sometimes when you see it, I mean, it almost looks like somebody sprayed some fluorescent paint in the forest or something. It can be that orange.
What was the Latin name?
Tilopolis Felias.
Oh, okay, yeah. I heard something else called. This is why you have the Latin. I heard this referred to as like the burnt orange bolete.
Oh, burnt orange, right. I'm sorry, I'm mixing.
The painted bolete is like a red and yellow, right?
Willis Pictus. Yes, that's true. Burnt orange bolete. I'm sorry about that. I maybe in my mind I called it the painted orange bolete. And that's where I got to. But yes, that's Willis Pictus, which now has a different name that I can't recall offhand. But it's red and it has fibers on the cap. It's actually a really cool looking bolete if you ever find it. It's usually in conifer woods. Okay.
I think they're calling Willis Pictus Willis Spraguei now.
Spraguei, that's it. You got it, Tom. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so this is a bolete. I am not the best at boletes. This might be Boletus nobilis, noble bolete. It has that
is what it was like. Some other folks on the Mushroom ID group that I put it to that were admins confirmed it as such, and I ate it and it was super delicious. So
that's good. Yeah, one of the things they talk about the nobilis is when it's young, which this one looks pretty young. The pore layer is stuffed, so there's it's kind of like a little closed cottony stuff on each of the pores, and they kind of decay away as the spores mature. So, and it kind of looks like it might be looking a bit stuffed. Let's see if we can zoom in. I think it's kind of hard to tell.
It might be hard to tell the size on this, but it might be an interesting comparison to look at the Lexinum. There's a white Lexinum.
Longicurvipes.
Well, it's not Longicurvipes. I get
the stipe is a little bit thinner though.
Yeah, and Longicurvipes actually, it's out on the porch. I found one of those today, but I didn't include the picture. I picked it and thought took a picture when I got home, but I never did. It tends to have like reddish or brownish kind of coloration on the stipe, and the cap is usually darker, and it kind of has like an undulating cap, kind of like the dimples of a golf ball, like some of that on there.
There's a white Lexinum. I found several of them today, which is called the ghost Lexinum.
Abatinum?
That doesn't sound familiar.
There's also a Hortonii.
No, it didn't have a wrinkled cap.
Oh, then I'm not sure.
It's pure white on the top, a little bit kind of not as wrinkled as a Hortonii, but a little bumpy is what I would say.
On the cap?
Yeah, on the cap.
Yeah. It could be Abatinum. It could be Holopus.
Holopus, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah. They're very similar mushrooms. Although Abatinum tends to have some gray coloration on the cap too.
Whoever took the picture, can you tell us what the scale is on this?
Yeah, geez. I would say the cap was maybe 2 inches across.
Oh, okay, that's big. Yeah.
What
Yeah.
about Ostrobolitus gracilis?
I don't encounter those very often, and boletes are not my strong suit. This looks more nobilis to me than the Ostrobolitus, in my
Okay.
opinion. I don't really know the way that the stem looks. You know, with it looks a bit more like nobilis. So you got to take all those features all together. All right, let's move on. Let's see what's next. All right, you guys probably saw some of these if you went out in the woods. They're fairly common right now. It's another bolete. This one didn't have an image of the cap, but I think we're going to see a cap later. This is one of the old men of the woods, the Strobilomyces. I believe they've changed that to Strobilurius now, so we're just, you know, I think they put one name on it, but I'm not sure. And even if you were to find the different species, they're kind of hard to distinguish between each other. So, Old Man of the Woods is good.
I think one of the distinguishing features, and a mushroom expert has a long discussion about this, it says it needs more study, but there's one that has yellow mycelium at the bottom and the other one has white mycelium. Both of them, I think, when you cut them, though, turn kind of pink and then ultimately turn black.
Right, and they basically turn your dish all black too. I've heard they taste.
I cooked them and I tried one and I was like, this is the most disgusting. It's the only mushroom I've ever had that I couldn't eat. I was like, no thanks.
I've heard they tasted like somebody like picked them all. They were like, oh yeah. They was like, oh, they kind of smell like dirt, and they tasted them. They're like, they kind of taste like dirt too.
No, they taste like slugs. The consistency, and they were very black when cooked. But it was cool to see them like slice them up, and yeah, to see them turn like from the pink to I mean,
the staining reaction.
It turns very quickly. Yeah.
But conversely, I heard Gary Linkoff say one time that this was one of, he really liked this as an edible, but only whenever it was very, very young.
That would make sense. They're usually better young anyway.
Oh, I'm remembering that the other distinction was that when we see the cap of this, one of them has really kind of pointed scales and the other one is more kind of flat scales. And
I've stopped trying to
the culinary use I've heard of these is, because you never find a whole bunch of them at once, is dry them, keep a bag of them, and you can throw them in a soup for texture, but they don't have much flavor.
Cool. All right. I think everybody knows what this is. The dark coloration, if we zoom in to the hymenium, the fertile surface, there's no gills. So this is actually the hymenium right here. That's where the spores are produced. These are black trumpets. Are they still going with cornucopioides, or is that a European species? Phalax now.
Phalax is the East Coast, more common East Coast version. There is a third one as well.
Yeah, there's a few.
But this seems to be the dominant one on the East Coast. It's supposed to have a kind of pinkish buff spore print. Has anybody succeeded in getting a spore print from it? I found the whole, ordinarily I've not seen a lot of these, but I did find several patches of them in the last couple of weeks. They're out. And somebody told me that Michael Weiss's Maryland Mushrooms has a ton of pictures of these, so they must be pretty common right now. Look for them in moss.
Yeah, around beach a lot of the time.
This was actually all 5 of these photos were on my mom's property in Saluda, Virginia, by a river in sort of sandy soil where there was moss and things like that. And those were quite delicious in the shrimp pasta, by the way.
That's good.
Hard to get some of the sand and the grit out of the I would have trimmed them more in respect. But.
A lot of the chanterelles are like that, I find. I think, you know, especially if they're down, if they come up and then it starts raining, and then that rain splashes the all the sand and dirt up on the underside. And even if you rinse them, and they can hold up to rinsing fairly well because they don't have these, you know, the gills to trap all that water. So you can actually kind of rinse chanterelles pretty well. Ray always said, throw them in a salad spinner. You spin it out, and then you get rid of most of that water. And some of the sand will come out too. One of the ways to get around that is if you make these in some sort of a sauce, just don't scrape the bottom of the pot. All that sand will settle at the bottom.
Good tips.
I'm always a little reluctant to put these in water because it does turn the water kind of blackish, and I'm afraid I'm looking at the flavor, which is leached out. An interesting thing about these, which I just experimented this week because I had so many to finally try to clean, is that if you cut them off at the bottom where the dirt is, they're hollow all the way down. And I took one of those cans of air spray that you use to clean off your computer keys,
Really?
and just blew it down the tube and blew all the stuff out because it does tend to collect. Stuff splashes up and dirt and mud gets down inside the inside of it. When I cook it, I tear them in half just so I can see what's down there and kind of brush it out.
There's so many. When you find them, though, there can be so many. I tend to dry them and kind of beat them about a bit, and hopefully that some of that sand is going to fall off. But it's always a good idea, if you're going to collect for the pot, to clean your mushroom before you put it in your bag. That's pretty much any mushroom that you get, if you're going to go for the pot. Now, if you're going for just ID, you might want to leave all that on there and maybe even dig it up and wrap it in something. Because if you don't clean it, like take for instance morels, I mean the cap on those things is all bumpy and all these pits and ridges. If you have a big clump of dirt on the bottom of this morel and it bumps up into this morel, you basically just put dirt and sand all over the cap of the morel next to it. So if you know that you've found edible species and you plan on collecting them, clean them as you go. That's always a good practice. Okay, let's see what's next. All right, so this is from Chrissy. So you can see this is growing on a big pine tree. At first I thought it was like a big old Ganoderma applanatum or something along those lines. I think this is actually an old red-belted polypore. So it's possibly that it's possible it's Fomitopsis pinicola. It's another one of those big, clunky polypores. I'm sure you guys have seen these. These are the Stinky Squid. Very common in mulch. They'll come up in the hundreds, and they have a sickly sweet stink to them. That's oh geez, now I'm blanking. Pseudocolus fusiformis. That's the Stinky Squid.
One thing that confused me about that one was that when I looked in the guidebook, they weren't fused at the top. I didn't know if they became unfused. I mean, it looked the most like that mushroom, but except for that part.
Yeah, like if you see this one here, it looks like it's still fused. You look at this. So this one's still kind of fused here. So this one just happens to have broken apart, but it's kind of fused here. So it's not always right at the tip. They're gonna vary between collections, but a lot of times you will see it where it's just you know, all of them are all still stuck together, but not always.
I didn't smell it because I didn't know till I got home that it was called the Stinky Squid. And I was actually running with my dog, and my dog went to the bathroom, and I was picking it up, and I saw that, and I thought it was a piece of cord. And then I was like, oh my gosh, that's one of those mushrooms. And I took the picture, but I didn't really try to smell it because I probably wouldn't have been able to anyway.
I'm surprised you didn't. I mean, they have a pretty strong stink about them. So I guess it depends on the way the wind's blowing or something. But
Like
yeah,
I said, picking up my dog's poop, so maybe that's why I didn't smell it.
yeah, that could be it. Try not to smell. All right, we saw some of these at the monthly meeting. So, anybody want to call out what that one is?
Is that a pearl oyster?
Oyster.
Yep. Looks like an oyster mushroom to me. You know, one of the summer oysters probably still. They're all edible. The winter one tends to be a little more, have a little firmer flesh and holds up in the pot better than these. These get a little flimsy. All right, so here is, let's zoom in on the bottom. Here's the Strobilomyces again. I saw quite a few of these today, but that's the cap of the old man of the woods. Like John was saying, this one looks like it has pointy, you know, fibers on the top there, but is it due to the conditions or, you know, so I've kind of stopped trying to distinguish it due to that, and I've turned into a lumper with the old man of the woods. I say a lumper. There's lumpers and splitters. Some people try and split out every species and look for all kinds of little bitty things that they can distinguish it to separate it out. And some people just kind of go, oh yeah, that's an old man of the woods, and lump it all into one group. So this other one up here at the top is, you can see it's kind of slimy and shiny, so it's very glutinous. This was probably a parrot mushroom. When they first start out, they tend to be green, and then as they age, they'll kind of fade out to this yellow, but they remain really glutinous and slimy. That's Gyroporous Pistiana. I'm sorry, I can't pronounce it. It starts with P.
Pianii? I don't know. It's not orange enough to. Leanna? I don't know if that's orange enough to be that.
No. The parrot mushroom.
Oh, okay.
It's a Hygropharus. It's Pistiana or something like that. And it's like, it's one of the new genus of Hydrophorus. And is Tom still there? Do you remember? It's like Gyroporous or Glio.
Yeah, I just put it in the chat box. It's Gyroporous.
Gyroporous.
Yeah, it's a mouthful is what it is.
The parrot mushroom. Right, thank you. Okay. All right, let me see. All right, let's see what's next. Okay, and so you can see this was in somebody's flower pot. So there is a mushroom that is very common in flower pots, and it looks very similar to this, but that one is typically yellow. Leucocaprinus bernbaumii. I think this is actually a little lepiota. And so the lepiotas are something you should be aware of, because you don't want to eat them, because some of them have amatoxins. And that's something you definitely want to stay away from. It may be something like cristata, but I can't be sure. There's lots of these little white mushrooms like this with kind of brown coloration on the top. There's one with like red in the middle, it's rubritinctus and things like that. So they have little, some of them you can distinguish and separate. but some of them can be really tough to distinguish. But anyway, I think that's what that is.
Mitch, does this have a veil?
This was the only photo I got of this one. So if Jim is online, Jim submitted this. No.
I do see some, woodland agaricus that look a bit like this, and though they do ultimately open up and get plain, but they're all going to have veils underneath, and they will have brown spore prints.
This one should have a veil. They typically do, and they have white spore prints. The Lepiotas do.
Except for the green one.
Well, but it's not even a Lepiota anymore. I think it probably was in the Lepiotas because of how it looked. And once they started determining where things fit in the tree, it's actually not actually a Lepiota, it's a chlorophyllum. So it's its own genus. But it's kind of the common name kind of stuck with it. And you don't want to eat that one either. For sure. All right, so John sent this one.
I'm sorry, which
This is not a
Lepiota?
fungus. This isn't a fungus.
Oh my God.
But it's
Not a fungus.
Milkweed.
This was out at Lake Needwood where I was finding a lot of funguses, but this was fungi. But this was a milkweed, and I saw on the underneath this dark spot, and I went up to it, and it was a ton of caterpillars. I assume that they're all monarch baby caterpillars.
They sure look like them.
But I'd never seen anything like this. And it looked like maybe they were planting milkweed out there to try to support the population.
Right. If there's not much around, they're going to need a lot of food with that number.
Yeah, there were a few other plants around, but not a ton.
Yeah. Anyway, I threw that in. Thought that was kind of cool. John, that's another one of your guys. It's beautiful.
Right. I keep on the overall yellow, bright yellow, strong reticulation causes me to identify it. I think it's I gave you the name, Mitch, but it's
Reticulotus ornatapes.
Ornatapes. Is it a Reticulotus?
I believe so now.
Yeah, and Ornatapes is referring to the pretty strong reticulation on this.
The ornate stalked bolete.
On this one, you can see, if you go back up to the top, what the reticulation are really stretched out pores. And so you can see that that's happening at the top, and that's what causes the reticulation on some boletes.
And this mushroom can have olive coloration on the cap. So it's typically always yellow underneath, but sometimes you'll get them and they'll be almost like a brown and green color on the cap. And it'll stain your fingers yellow too if you mess with it.
Right. But it does pass our test for edibility. It won't poison you, but it's not great. I haven't had one that I really liked.
This like the Tilopolis Felias, I always, if I nibble it, it tastes bitter to me.
Mm-hmm. Well, even cooked, it's not great.
Oh, yeah.
But I've been seeing quite a few of these, and many of them are even quite brighter yellow than this.
Yeah.
They're very striking, beautiful mushrooms.
So we were talking about the old man of the woods earlier. This is another of John's, and you can see there's that cap there.
Right. The old man of the woods is interesting because it does turn pink immediately when you cut it, and then that pink will ultimately turn to black. It takes about 5 minutes.
I guess you were prepping that for the pot, huh?
Yeah, I tried it. I was unimpressed.
Okay. This was an interesting little collage here. These are the same mushroom, right, John? Or the
Yes,
same
this
species.
is an easy mushroom to identify. It's called the Chestnut Bolite. It has, we'll probably see some pictures of the top. It's kind of tan, yellowish tan. The underneath, though, it starts out almost white and proceeds to a more yellowish color as it gets older. And so I put this picture, I put in order of the different colors based on the age to kind of show the gradation of the color. But the key characteristic I notice is this kind of brownish stipe, which is hollow. And so even if you just bend down and squeeze it, you can tell that it's going to be a chestnut bolete. And these are all very small. Probably hardly ever bigger than 2 inches across the cap.
On the East
diameter.
Coast. The West Coast gets some pretty big ones.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Same one?
They call it the same thing, Gyroporous castaneus. But yeah, I think it grows bigger over there. Gyroporous, that is one of the features of the genus, is having a hollow stipe. So all the Gyroporous have hollow stipes. There's another one that's cyanescens, and it's like the really quick staining blue, super dark blue, fast. And that's a Gyroporous, and it also has a hollow stipe. These can be fairly common, but they're usually not growing in big clusters. And they are edible.
and ordinarily I don't find enough to even cook. I find 1 or 2 and dry them and throw them in a bag, kind of treat them like Old Man of the Woods. They don't have great flavor, but what I noticed in cooking these fresh was that and this was in olive oil, and they kind of turn reddish when you're sautéing them. I thought that was unusual.
Yeah, I found enough of those one time to throw them in some eggs, and I cooked them first and then dumped the eggs in. I thought they were pretty good. Okay, so this is a great find here because this could help save some people some upset stomach. So I don't know what you guys see when you're looking at this, but what do you think they might look like? Some of the people who've hunted some before. You ever heard of pink bottoms?
Mushroom.
Agaricus.
Agaricus. Yes, they look like or they're little campestris. Yes, so they look like a little Agaricus campestris, which I can't tell what that one is, but that could be Agaricus campestris. But
no, I think I decided these were all
of them. Okay.
Though I don't see a ring on that one. You're right.
Right, and
they grow in the same place.
It does kind of have that purple hue to it. So this is actually a Stropharia. This is Stropharia Coronella, and it's called Coronella. I think I put your other one in. I don't think I put the other one because it was kind of blurry. But the Coronella, like Corona that we got going around now, it means crown. And so it's kind of hard to see in this image, but it will leave markings that basically are the gills pulling away from that partial veil on the stipe. And you'll see distinct lines where those gills were. So it kind of looks like a crown around that cover the top of the partial veil there.
And the striations tend to be pretty noticeable because Stropharia has a very dark spore print and the spores drop down on it.
Right.
The other thing about this is, to me, it has a little bit of yellowish in the center, but they are about the same size. Find them in grass. They look a lot. You can find them growing along with campestris when you're collecting them.
So
I,
if
some people have probably eaten them mistakenly. It's not deadly poison, but not recommended.
yeah, I don't doubt it. Like this one here, I don't see a ring on here. And this has got the pink coloration. I mean, that could be an agaricus right next to it. I don't know. I mean, it could have just got rubbed off. But Stropharia tend to have more of a purple coloration, whereas agaricus are going to be more of that chocolate. Although sometimes they can be a little purpley looking. But these have more of a purple color to their spores.
Yeah, I think the color changes. They start out kind of gray,
Yes.
pink.
Yeah.
So it does look like a pink bottom. And then it progresses to get darker and darker, and then ultimately kind of purple-black.
And classically, they do have that yellow cap. But I mean, if it fades in the rain, you could make that mistake. And they grow in the same place. So this is definitely a mushroom to be aware of if you plan on collecting for the pot any kind of especially Agaricus campestris.
I'm curious to hear from anybody else. For a couple of years, I've hardly found any Agaricus campestris. I have not found any this year again. Finding some Agaricus in the woods. Is anybody else finding campestris these days? Commonly out in, fields, grass.
I found something that looked something like this, and I could not figure out what it was. I have the photos. I'd love to send to you, John, or you, Mitch, because I couldn't figure it out, and now I need to kind of go back and compare with some of the features we just talked about.
So I'm not hearing anybody say that they found a lot of Agaricus yet. It's interesting. This is about the right time of year, right, Mitch?
And with all the rain, I'm surprised they're not everywhere.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is around now. Maybe if we keep, maybe after these tropical storms blow through in the next few days, we'll see some popping up. I don't know. But no, I haven't seen many clusters of them either. Although they've never been common to me. I haven't found them often.
I used to find a lot in Silver Spring, kind of in front of schools in the yards where they mow it like maybe once every 2 weeks, and they don't put a lot of chemicals on it, so it's
I was going to say
a nice, good field to look in.
Yeah, if people start using fungicides, it might harm them. Certainly cut them back. All right, so this is another one from John. Beautiful, beautiful pictures here. So this actually, you can actually see where this was still attached here. A lot of times when you find these, you don't. So, John, I think you were thinking they were something different.
Hypsigus ulmonarius, I thought, but the ulmonarius is supposed to have a hairy stipe, and I found some others which were much hairier than this, but that's what I thought it was. What did you think it is?
This looks more like Pleurotus dryaenus to me, the veiled oyster. And so you can see where it's actually pulled away from stipe here. So that cap was connected right there. These are not very furry, but they're not always super hairy like they can be. What just happened? Oh, there we go.
I can't tell for sure, but that doesn't look like a elm tree to me either.
That was at Lake Needwood, up on that little knoll right below the.
So
there's
I'm
a
pretty
little
sure
bit of fuzziness there.
There is a little bit of fuzziness there. Your next image, that's typically what Pleurotus dryaenus, this is how they look often. You'll get that stipe like there. Sometimes you'll get these fibers on the cap too.
So not a hypsigus?
I don't think so. I think this is a Pleurotus. Hypsigus tends to have how should I describe that? So on the cap, there's a distinct there's a distinct pattern on the cap of Hypsizygus, where it's almost like if you were to look at the top layer of bubbles coming together, where they're kind of expanding, and some are bigger and some are smaller. So you've got these weird, like, roundish, hexagonal looking pattern on the cap. At least when I've found them in the woods. And it seems like every time you get them, they've got this weird pattern on the cap.
When I was researching this, there were two kinds of Hypsizygus. There was an ulmonarius, and then there was a tessellata.
Mm-hmm.
And it seemed to be that the fuzzy stipe was what distinguished them. More interesting as a culinary matter, these didn't really have the oyster smell to me, and some of them were quite large, bigger than my hand when I found them. They are edible, but really tough. I would say kind of like the train wrecker, unless you're really picking the small ones. And
Did you try that?
Have I tried that? Oh yeah, I've tried that. But I picked some of the two smallest ones of the ones I found out at Lake Needwood and cooked those. And I thought that was pretty good in terms of texture. It wasn't too tough. Didn't, kind of like oyster. It does not have a magnificent flavor to me, but it didn't have an oyster smell.
This photo here, considering it has what looks like where the veil was attached,
mm-hmm.
I think this is more dryness.
Mm-hmm. And what's the reputation for that for edibility?
It's edible, but I've never tried it. It's usually, if you find, they can be huge. They can really be like very large.
Yeah, there were some of these in the nature preserve, Scott's Run, on the other side of the American Legion Bridge, on a downed log as opposed to a standing tree, which I also thought was the same thing, and they were huge.
Yeah, a lot of times they'll have these hairs on the cap too. I tend to avoid them. Usually when I find them, they're not as good shape as the ones you have there. Okay, Lisa, these are the ones I just put in here. I don't even know what to tell you. Anybody want to suggest? So it does look like a Cortinarius, like you had suggested in your email. I don't know what Cortinarius to even suggest to you. Anybody else want to venture?
Mitch, what about a Satharella?
Well,
too broad gills for that?
Yes, they have widely spaced. The gills are very widely spaced. It's not really starting to produce spores there, but it does look like it's probably a Cortinarius.
Right.
It was
also the swollen base.
The spore print was rusty brown.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, that's definitely a Cortinarius. Sorry, I'm not the best with quartz either.
Well, there's so many to choose from.
It's true. I don't even know what to tell you about this one either.
That's a terrible picture. I sent two, but they also were growing in the same area, but little orange. They have little orange hairs at the base. I thought I sent a picture, another one with the.
I only input 2 pictures.
Okay. Oh, there it is. Yeah, you could see like the little hairs.
This actually looks like it might be a Cortinarius as well.
Okay.
It looks like it's kind of trying to develop those rusty gills there.
Actually, I took a spore print of this, and it was like a buff color, almost like a very pale cream.
Did it dropped them though? It dropped a decent amount.
Yeah, I actually did a spore print on aluminum foil, and it came out like a cream color.
Oh.
Yeah,
I don't know
I
what
was
to tell
thinking,
you.
looking at the cap of this, that it might be one of those odiferous russulas. Did you happen to smell it?
It doesn't look like a Rustula, no.
No, I don't. I took this like 3 weeks ago when I found them. They
This
were really pretty.
well, also the Russulas tend to have like the white cap. This looks more the gills don't look right. I don't think it's a Rustula.
Right. No, there's a group called Fetidus.
Yeah, the like the
And I'm seeing a whole bunch of these the ones that smell like almond in grassy areas, kind of the same color as a Samicola, which would be, but they're not Lactarius.
Yeah,
So-
there's a lot of them
And they're
in
kind
that.
of pleated around the edge like that.
Yeah, they are, and they kind of have little granules a lot of times.
Right. So next time you find it, you might try to snap the stipe and see whether it seems to snap like a Rustula.
This
Okay.
isn't. It's not. Look at that. It's not a Rustula.
Well, it doesn't look thick enough to be a Rustula, I agree. And the base, again, doesn't look like a Rustula base. So I agree with you. It's probably a Cortinarius, but the
Well,
spore
not if
print
it's
is odd.
right. I mean, there could be a number of things that we're missing here. You know, I don't even like. Usually, I have a direction to give you. I don't even have a direction to give you on that one.
Okay,
Sorry.
that's okay.
It's cool. Good to find new things. I can flip through books and see if I can find something. All right, Matt submitted this one. We've seen lots of these in the monthly meetings. It's another one of those Ganodermas. Let me turn on my AC. It's getting kind of warm in here. But he had suggested Curticii. I think I would put this one more in the sessile group, just because the way the overlaying caps, or there's so many clustered and over top of each other. Curticii tends to kind of grow out more, from my experience. There are a couple things you can do. I don't know the whole list, but there's a paper out there that depends on if you split that tissue. There's different colorations in the flesh, and that can lead you different directions. So there's a lot of Ganodermas out there that we lump them, like I was talking about lumping and splitting. I think a lot of them are getting lumped together, and eventually they might start splitting some of these apart.
Does anybody use these Ganoderma sessiles for kind of like what we call lucidum, but it's not lucidum either, for medicinal tea?
I just have been doing a tincture with them.
Uh-huh.
Like extracted.
I did it. I'm
Okay.
sorry. I did a tea from Stugay. I found a bunch in Shenandoah.
Was it young or old?
Young. There's a
How-
ton of it growing.
How was it? I mean, was it really? Did you just kind of choke it down, put it in a drink, or?
It's very bitter.
Yeah,
It's hard to do.
it is. This is why you'd probably want a tincture,
Right.
and chase it down. I was playing frisbee golf, and one of these was growing all over this log, and my friend was like, "It's medicinal. Let's bring it home." I'm like, "If you want, and he made up a tea and tried to choke it down. I told him, I'm not even trying it. It's gonna be so bitter.
There's somebody from the Western PA Club who uses the bitter Ganodermis like this as replacement for hops.
I was going to try that.
So that seems like a much better way to take your medicine.
Absolutely. I was actually thinking about trying that when I was still brewing.
I've been doing my own bitters and adding not this, but some other, like some of the bitter bolites I've been experimenting with adding to my bitters.
Huh. This actually might be a better choice. I don't know. And then you'd have the medicinal factor as well.
Yeah.
But that is an unusual structure, though. And the one that's behind it looks more typical of what I see. It's often around stumps, not on it,
Right.
and a lot of them come up. Doesn't have much of a stipe.
All right, so it looks like we're on to my mushrooms. I threw this one in there, but I tried looking in the Bolite book. I couldn't figure it out. It looks like some sort of Bolitus. I thought that this nice dark red right at the bottom would have helped lead me to something, but I could not figure out what this thing was. There were quite a few of them. This is I went to Patuxent today, the Patuxent Research Refuge or whatever, and this is actually growing in the parking lot. That parking lot almost always has, if it's been a good year, some mushrooms growing in flushes all around if you just look around the parking lot. But yeah, this is another Bolite. You can see the strong blue staining reaction. This happened fairly quickly, but I don't know what to tell you it is.
Mitch, is the color sort of washed out on the cap of that one, or was it really?
No, this is pretty much what they look like. Some of them were more yellow, but they were all this kind of pale color, all of them. So John mentioned Samacolor or maybe
Samacola, I think.
Alnicola or whatever. Yeah, there's some big, giant, orangish Lactarius, and if you look close, I've scratched the gills here. That's too close, and you can see some latex dripping out right there. I didn't really give it too much time. You can see it's very zonate, even in this enrolled margin. And then in this cap, you can see the zonations all around it. I tend to put Alnicola on them. Samacola might work too, but I'm not certain that that's what they are.
And the milk is very acrid. I tested it and just.
I didn't taste this one.
In case not to eat it, just put a little on my tongue, and I did that last week when I was on Channel 5 because I was called over to Bethesda to ID some mushrooms in somebody's yard, and they had a bunch of these. Which I said, well, I don't need to drive over to Bethesda to see that. I got a bunch in my neighborhood. But it does seem to be an unusually good year for a not very good mushroom.
Yeah. This can grow in abundance, for sure. A lot of times when it comes up in abundance. So this is a pretty common mushroom to find. This is actually growing around pine. So that's the only place you'll find these, is near conifers. This is what they call the Makers Polypore. Oh geez, I'm blanking on the name. I did this in the woods with somebody. Blanking on the name of Makers Polypore.
Schwannitzi, something like that.
Schwannitzi. I just need to push over the edge sometime. But this is a younger version. I found this later, but I figured I'd throw it in there to show the difference between the older and the younger. Anybody know what color it makes?
I think the reason it's called Dyer's Polypore is it depends on the mordant you use. So it has a lot of possible colors.
Okay. It's usually gradations of a similar color, but I'm not sure what color this one makes. But when you find it, you can find them pretty big. So I'm sure they're not hurting to find more of this stuff. All right. So this is what's the one we were talking about before we started, the ones that are everywhere. Talking about mushrooms in abundance that aren't worth much. This one. This is very common. We find it all the time. And right now, they are everywhere. I don't know if I put, nope, I didn't. I have another picture. I took a picture just because everywhere you walked, they were all over the place. This is a Rustula. It stains brown, as you can see here when I scrape the gills. It has this kind of brown coloration. It's white with the brown colors. I can't remember. I'm sorry if you're on. I can't remember who said it was like a partially burnt or toasted marshmallow. That's a good description of it. They tend to smell a little fishy, like even when they're fresh, but especially when they start getting older, they start reeking. And just the number that are out right now that are starting to decompose. There were a few times you'd be walking and be like, "Oh my God, that's foul," and it's probably these guys rotting away.
I have a question. I have a quick question. So I have been finding they don't look quite like that, but I've been doing a lot of research and Lactarius, I'm going to say it wrong, Volumus?
Volumus, yes.
Volumus, okay. I actually I'm very careful with eating mushrooms. So I was really took a spore print, did a bunch of stuff, checked the, watched some videos from Adam Harrington, read my books, did the smell test, which they say can be fishy, right?
Yeah.
So the milk is brown, or it'll stain. Like literally when I picked it, milk just exude out of it like really fast.
Yes, it pours.
So and I took a spore print. Anyways, make long story short, after about 3 days, I decided to fry some up. I cooked them really well, and I took a tiny, tiny nibble because I got sick once with oysters, believe it or not. I did not cook them well, and I got violently ill, so that was a lesson learned. So I just took a teeny, teeny bite, and I'm waiting.
How long are you waiting?
So it's been like almost 3 hours.
Oh, I see. Okay.
But when I tell you a teeny bite, I mean a teeny. That's what I do with all my mushrooms. I do a teeny bite.
Well, how did it taste?
It was fine. I mean, I found a bunch of Lactarius indigos just the other day, and I ate those fine. But was I incorrect? Now I'm getting nervous. Like, was I incorrect?
Okay. Or so did you look at the stem, the stipe?
Yes.
What color was the stipe?
It was almost the same color as the cap. It was like an orange.
That's great. Typically, that's what they are. They almost have the same color stipe as they do the cap.
Right.
The latex will steer you right clear of this mushroom. This mushroom is a Rustula, so it's in the same family as the Rustula lactarius, but they don't have latex. So
wait, these ones don't?
These have no latex.
Oh, okay. No, mine was seeping milk like crazy.
From what you said, and it's stained things brown.
Yep.
And it was real sticky.
Yes.
I'm pretty sure you got they call it the beefsteak, or Lactarius volumus or Lactarius corugus.
Or I heard tawny milk cap or Bradley or
Bradley.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yes, I've been finding a few of those as well, though it's hard for me to tell the difference between that and a corugus. They're very similar. Some people say the corugus doesn't have as much of a fishy smell.
Can y'all see my picture?
Yeah.
Beautiful.
These are there was a few out today.
Yeah, I found mine today too. And like I said, I've been finding them, but I did not eat them until I said I really did some serious research before I did it, and everything matched. The milk, the color of the cap and the stem. It smelled fishy. I did the
Yeah.
spore print.
So these are older and still they're able to exude a lot of latex.
So you're saying these ones here in this picture do not produce any latex at all?
Nope, they're Rustulas.
Okay.
They'll just stain brown when you strike the gills.
Okay, got it. No, mine definitely had milk.
And it's pretty quick. You can see this has some brown staining, but that took a while to develop.
And what I would say about these is they can be about the same size, and they, as Mitch is showing, they can turn up to be vase-like, and these will turn up vase-like as well, strongly enrolled to start with. I think I might have tried a little nibble of one of these today just to see, because I see it didn't have a milk coming out of it, and I thought, well, how bad can this be? And it was pretty acrid.
Really?
I
The
spit it out.
I didn't know compacted was acrid. I don't know that I've ever tasted. I smell them and I just want to.
Well, and that's the other thing I did, because I know I've tried different kinds of these, and some of them are horribly acrid. And I did do the taste nibble on the Lactarius today, and there was no acrid, nothing. So.
Mm-hmm. Well, you probably got a good one.
It sounds like what you got is a Vulimus.
Okay.
From what you're saying, I think
Mhm.
you're okay. Everybody has some
Bulimus
people.
also dry pretty well. If you find some or find more than you can handle, or you want to experiment with one, they would dry and reconstitute pretty well in my experience.
I tried indigo before. I did not like it, but I think I think it was more of a texture thing.
Mm-hmm.
It was almost grainy. Maybe I should have cooked it longer or something.
Mhm.
But and I was wondering if it was because of so Rustulas and Lactarius have these spherical cells in the cellular structure. Instead of all being like bricks in a wall, they've kind of got these round cells. And I'm wondering if that affected the texture of it, because it's kind of grainy. It didn't have much taste. I've tried these, but I think Bruce cooked them, and we were like, "Oh my God, this is so good! Yum yum yum!" And like, "What'd you put in this?" And he said, "Bacon." And we're like, "Oh, we're digging the bacon." So.
I agree with you about the texture. I've been trying some of the green ones, kind of generic, what we call Rustula crustosa. And those are generally considered to be safe to eat, but all of them have this kind of sandy, grainy texture, which I think is probably just typical of Rustulas.
And Lactarius.
You know, maybe the Russians are right. You got to boil them 3 times, and then maybe they turn into something that's not quite as annoying.
So I have a question though, just
Talking
for
about
my
washing
knowledge.
out your flavor. Go ahead. Sorry.
For my own knowledge, like if you know, God forbid I ate one of these, like what's I know they're not edible.
Rustula.
Are they considered one of the poisonous mushrooms, or are they just gonna make you sick?
I don't even know. I don't know about the edibility of this one, but I don't know that anybody would want to try it. Rustulas and Lactarius in general will not kill you. You know, like there aren't any with amatoxin. They don't have like Cortinarius, where you've got these compounds that affect your kidneys. If you get a bad Rustula or a bad Lactarius, you might be yakking, but it's not necessarily going to kill you.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, you got to be careful if you have underlying issues. You know,
Right.
Some sort of dehydration could really affect you. So it's best to avoid those kind of things. And who wants to have an upset stomach for a day or two?
Right.
But in general, they're relatively safe. I think this is how some of the Russian people can get away with throwing all of these. They basically just collect all the Rustulas, throw them in a pot, and boil them. Throw away the water 3 times or something. Good girl. Okay, moving on. So at Secrenoto, we find these often. And these are actually another not polypore. These are also another mushroom that you can use for the dye pot. And I don't know if I'm going to be able to tell. Yeah, you can kind of tell. It doesn't have pores. It has teeth. So this is a Hydnellum. I think this might be concrescens. I'm trying to remember now. There's another one that's called Scrubiculatum that looks very similar, except one is zonate and one is not zonate. But they both, didn't like that. There it goes. So this one is, well, I don't know. You tell me, is that zonate?
Little.
Anyway, it's probably one of those two. And apparently these make a teal, of course, depending on the mordant. But I believe that this makes a teal color in the dye pot.
Where do you find those, Mitch? What are they associated with?
I'm not sure because I was in mixed woods and I don't know what the books say.
Mm-hmm.
I
What's
don't
the name
recall.
again?
Hydnellum concrescens.
Is that a hedgehog? Would that be considered a?
That's.
Did I say that right?
That hedgehogs are hydnum.
Hydnum. Okay.
These are hydnellums.
Okay.
So, and it's referring to the teeth. They both have teeth.
Got it.
These are much too tough. I don't know if they're edible or not, or toxic or not. But they're very tough. You wouldn't want to eat these. All right, so these are, of course, much smaller than the picture makes them look. And this was growing on pine. So whenever I see like little mega clusters of little mushrooms, I always think Zorophyllina. And that's just from doing this for a while. There's some that grow on hardwood and there's some that grow on pine. I believe this is Zorophyllina campanella, and then Kaufmannii grows on hardwood. But they look almost identical, so you kind of have to know what they're growing on. Cute little mushrooms.
In the picture, Mitch, it's looking a little pink on the top. Is that right?
They're more of a browny orange.
Mm-hmm.
The apple, I have an iPhone, and it does not take the best color pictures I found of mushrooms. I actually had to alter some of the pictures because it puts a blue tone on everything.
Right.
But I don't like how it doesn't take very good pictures in the woods.
So-
Well, I'm watching two different monitors here, and these things are somewhat coming out different colors, so it may depend on your monitor too.
Yeah.
So I saw some of these growing on a hemlock. I think it was a hemlock stump, and is the other name for them called fuzzyfoot or fuzzyfoot
would be Flammulina, Velutipes. Those are actually Enokis. But when you find them in the woods, well, I'll start off by saying I can see why you might kind of mix the two. These tend to have radial lines. Flammulina doesn't have the radial lines like this. Also, these look big. They are probably, a few millimeters, 3-4 millimeters wide caps. They're actually very tiny.
Right. I'm sorry. I screwed up. The one I took a picture of, it says Zorophyllina Cautic.
Those are typically a larger mushroom.
Okay.
Catastatus or something like that.
Castaniolis.
Castani. Oh, I don't know that one.
Yeah, that's it.
There's a Kaufmannii. There's a Campanella or Campanella. There's a Petastatus. That's typically much bigger than these. I don't recognize them when you mentioned. That doesn't mean it's not out there. I don't know everything for sure. So you might have seen something different.
Well, I'm naturalist is calling it Zemphyr, like you said, and then it's spelling it Cauticinalis.
Never heard of it. Maybe they changed the name. They do that often.
Okay.
You know, if somebody publishes a paper, somebody else publishes a paper, people start going with the second paper, and then later on they realize, oh, this guy was actually first to describe this, so they switch it back to that name or something along those lines.
Got it.
So it's possible. It's Zorophyllina.
Okay.
You can see these grown on stumps. They'll cover the whole stump. These are fantastic. I love these little mushrooms. They're so cool. All right. Well, I found a few of these guys. I think you might be able to tell what they are. I'm a little leery to put the smooth chanterelle name on these.
Chanterelle.
So if you're not familiar with chanterelles, I'm trying to zoom in here so you can kind of see. Notice that these are not like knife-edged gills. They're kind of rounded, so it's just a waviness to the gills. They may be smooth chanterelles, but I think there are a lot of chanterelles out there that were lumping. And this might be one of them. We tend to find these fairly often. Or it just could be the fact that this is a smooth chanterelle. It just decided I'm going to grow a wavier hymeneum. This one on the right, they call that a rose comb. And that could be due to a virus. It could be to like environmental contamination. Things of that nature can cause this to happen.
Mitch, did you think these were both the same mushroom?
They were growing right near each other.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
How big are they? Because I find a bunch that look like this, but they're tiny, and I haven't found any that are like a meaty size.
These are fairly large. I mean, this is probably about a 3-inch cap here. So it was a pretty decent sized mushroom. This is probably a few inches here. So maybe 2.5 and then 3 inches here.
I think for the tiny ones, look at Cantharellus minor.
Yeah.
I've been finding a lot of that too. They do tend to have somewhat veining like that. They may be maybe more yellow in the stipe, a little bit thinner stipe. There's a ton of chanterelles apparently, and I was reading
there are
Mushroom Expert, and Michael Kuo was inviting people to send in their chanterelles because it needs to be sorted out. I think I found 7 different kinds in the last couple of weeks.
I saw that, I forget the guy's name who came to the Sequinota, and he has the guidebook. What I thought they were was something called Craterellus Ignacolor because they were so small. And
they could have been that. They could have been tubiformis. If you're not certain they were chanterelles, they could have been a little orange Hygropharus, because there are some little orange mushrooms that you might, be indistinguishable unless you know what you're looking for. That look like a little chanterelle.
Do the little ones smell like apricots? Because mine didn't really smell like apricots.
I don't think there's enough flesh there to release enough aroma for you to tell. Maybe if you had a bag of them and smelled it together, you might get something, but I don't think there's enough there to smell it.
I think also, Mitch, those 3 that we were just talking about, Craterellus Ignacolor, Appalachians, and tubiformis, they're not solid like the regular chanterelle. They're more like a trumpet.
Yep, where they got that hollow stipe going on again. There'll be some more. There'll be some Ignacolor in a minute.
Yeah, I was looking at tubiformis because I thought maybe I was finding some, and I'm recalling that they were more kind of brownish.
Yeah.
And they were more West Coast, and there's something on the East Coast called Infubula, I don't know. I wrote it
Indefinable
down for you,
format,
Mitch.
something.
A very long
Formus, yeah.
that they have a hollow stipe and often are vase-like and kind of like a black chanterelle. Did this have a did it have a depression in the center?
This is a chanterelle. This is like a true regular smooth or one of the other chanterelles. This is big enough. It's not hollow. It's fleshy. Yeah. Now this is a chanterelle, not one of the little one of the little guys. And then there was these guys.
Wow.
I love finding stuff like that. I didn't bring a bag, and this is fairly early on the walk, and I was like, I can't let these go. I left a lot of them. I like picking the bigger ones and leaving the smaller ones to grow and spread their spores. But I did pick a number of these guys.
I found a bunch of these this year.
So the black
in
chanterelles
Virginia.
are up. This was today.
Yeah.
Fairly easy to distinguish. We saw these earlier. Look at this hymenium. It's very hardly even ridgy. There are like Cantharellus cinereus is another black chanterelle, but it's much more, instead of being this trumpet that's hollow, they're more of a fleshy stem. They have more of an overlying cap, and they have more veiny hymenium, but they're black. So there's a number of black chanterelles, but these are the phalax. I think the Cornucopioides is the European species name for it. All right, you were talking about the big milkies. There were a few of these out there today. You can see right there, I scraped it. I think I still have that mushroom. And let's see if I don't have my camera here. That's the same scrape now. It's very dark brown. So over time it stains. I actually had this drip on a basket when I was collecting them one time years ago, and it left a big drip mark and turned brown on the basket. So this is probably Lactarius Ignacolor. It does kind of have that aroma. The cap doesn't look too corrugated, although up here, this is kind of what Carugas can look like. Carugas tends to be darker from my experience. They say one doesn't smell and the other one does. I find they both smell. But, but you can see the stipe is almost the same color as the cap, and the gills are a tan color. I find sometimes when they're very young, you're not gonna be able to see this, but they can be darker. I don't know if you see, this is a much younger, and you see how much darker that those gills are?
Yeah.
And this is, it's kind of hard to tell with this, but anyway, this is a fairly easy mushroom to distinguish if it has all these key features. Voluminous latex, it's going to drip a lot. It's sticky when it gets on your hands. This darker brown cap with almost the same color stipe. When you find these, it's pretty clear what you found. I think this is probably one of the easier mushrooms to identify.
But I agree with Mitch that Carugas is hard to tell difference, and I don't really care which one it is, because I think they're both very similar in terms of edibility. There's the third Lactarius we eat, which is a little bit earlier, has much wider spaced gills as the Hygropharoides. And I think they've changed these from Lactarius to Lactifluus now.
Did they?
Yeah.
Okay.
But that's still the same mushroom.
Right. All right. Here's another bolete I can't tell you the name of. I tried looking it up in the book, but I didn't find anything. There were a few of them, not too many.
Was that yellow on the top?
It's yellow on the cap. I was wondering if it was the same mushroom, but the other ones, they all had the red down at the bottom. This,
Right.
the red goes all the way towards the top of the stem.
Well, the Bayerangii, formerly bicolors, could in sunshine bleach out to yellowish.
Even the young ones were yellow.
Oh,
Yeah. Like
did you,
this
cut,
one.
did you cut it to see how deep the pores were?
I think I left it on the port, but no, they're thicker. They have a deeper pore layer. They're definitely not they're not one of the bicolors. They look like they started yellow. I don't think they got washed out. And usually the bicolor is more enrolled when it's young, and this is a fairly young mushroom, and it's already plain. If you guys have any questions about some of the features that I'm talking about or that we're talking about, feel free to ask. If you don't know anything that we say, you're welcome to inquire. This is a cool little mushroom. I don't find it very often, and I actually don't like touching it because to me, the smell is foul and it sticks to you. And so that sickly sweet smell stays on your skin. They may have changed the name of this now. This grows on pine. It's usually yellow. Sometimes it has green tones in it. And it has this kind of, not tremella, help me out, guys. Marulius flebia. It has kind of like a flebia, wavy, veiny hymenium. It's kind of cool looking. For the longest time, I couldn't figure out what this was. And then I was looking through one of the bolete books, and there it was. And in the bolete book, it's Meorganum curtisii. But I think they've changed the name. Anyway, it's cool to me.
How did you spell the genus name you thought it was?
The genus Meorganum.
Meorganum, okay.
Something like that, curtisii. Google that, it'll probably suggest it. I don't know if you guys have noticed, but you may not be writing Latin names in your Google very often. Google has imported all the Latin names of mushrooms, so it autocorrects the spelling. I'm like, yes, this is awesome. Little puffballs. I'm sure you guys have seen these in the past. These are your Jamaica type little puffballs. You can see the little spines all over them. Fairly common. Some people eat them. I'm not a fan.
For that kind of pear-shaped, is there something other than perlatum that you see? The other ones seem to be rounder.
I think perlatum and Jamaica are the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
No, not usually. Usually the other ones don't have as much of a sterile base like that. Usually they're just round. Think of the pyroforme growing on wood. It's like right up on it.
I found some of those recently and put them on my black chanterelle pizza. They weren't bad, and they were probably better than a lot of the other puffballs I eat. And what we learned from, was it Bill Russell at Sequinota a couple of years ago? When you collect these little ones like this, you got to eat them right away.
Right, yeah. Well, they'll start turning, and if they're not pure white inside, you certainly don't want to eat them. If you guys don't know, the puffballs, the inside of this, they're gyasters. So they're like stomach mushrooms. the spores are produced inside in a gleba, they call it. And this little dark spot right here, as they get older, will corrode away. And when the raindrops hit it, it poofs out the spores. So this is a cool mushroom. This is actually a cap and stem mushroom, but it has teeth. That's probably way too close. You can see they're even going down the stipe here. So this is Sarcodon, Ember Kratom. I believe this is what they call the hawk's wings you got somewhere, John? Someplace.
Yeah, well, there's apparently two different varieties, and the ones out in the Rocky Mountains are actually edible. The East Coast version is, I've only found it a few times. It's said to be, in my experience, was too bitter to really want to eat.
I didn't
The
taste
Rocky Mountain ones are quite good.
I
I'm
like 'em
originally from
too.
Colorado.
Yes, right. So I had somebody in the Denver club sending me some in exchange for hen and chicken, which they don't have.
Weird.
Can confirm. Picked my first chicken a week or so ago and went, I've never had that before.
Nice. Anyway, I always like finding toothed fungi. Kind of fun. Okay, so here's some little orange guys that could possibly be confused for tiny little Chanterelles just because they're orange, but they're actually a Hygropharus. That's another genus I need to work on my species with. Anybody have a suggestion of what these might be?
Hygropharus is about as far as I go too. I did have a collection of pictures which included this called not Chanterelles.
There's a lot. They're usually pretty colorful. Some aren't. They're called the waxy caps. They will have true gills. That mushroom does not taste good. Blah. I just nibbled on this Sarcodon, and it is not very tasty. So if you were to take those gills and rub them in your fingers, it would feel waxy. So that's why they call them the waxy caps. They could be any number of colors. That yellowy green one that was real glutinous earlier was one. Anyway, that's one I need to learn more species of.
The thing that distinguishes those for me is that they all kind of have a somewhat translucent stipe. They don't seem to be as solid as a Chanterelle, even
True.
the hollow stipe ones.
Yeah, they're kind of weak.
And
Some
they're
of the
wetter.
bigger ones are pretty sturdy, but the little ones are usually pretty wimpy. All right, so this is growing on pine again. So this is going to help to determine what to call this. I believe this is a Tricolemopsis. There's a yellow Tricolemopsis that grows on pine. It tends to have these dark fibrils on the cap, and as it gets bigger, they kind of, as they spread out, you see more of the yellow. So you can see this one's much darker. The fact that this was pine wood helps me to distinguish this. If this was on regular wood, I would be like, I don't know what the heck that is. Okay, we got some more latex over here. Dark cap, dark stipe, at least on this younger one, that's almost the same color. I believe this may be Lactarius Ignacolor. There's a group, I put them in kind of like the Gyroporous Eye group, and they tend to have the same color cap and the stem, and it's always real like dark brown. a lot of times Girardii will have like this little scalloped margin from the gills holding it back, and so you'll see these like little crenellated, rounded little edges. But because this one doesn't have it, that's why I put the Ignacolor. It's another one that's colored like this.
What was the one before? I'm so sorry. I had the one before that one.
This
Was that the
is,
same?
I believe it's Tricolemopsis Decora.
Okay.
So this is a polypore. If you were to see it without this portion, you might be like, wow, that's some dark turkey tail or something. And then you flip it over and you see it's got these gills. Well, they're not true gills. These are also extended pores. This is a polypore. This grows on pine. Gliophilum sepiarium. I found this growing on, I had put in a bunch of pine timbers around my garden, and this stuff started growing on them, and it basically ate them, and they all decayed away. So you find this in pine often. Pretty distinct. I'm pretty sure it has a common name, but I don't know what it is. Anybody know what the common name is? No? Okay. This was the picture I took. This was everywhere. These are all Rustula compacta. And you can see there's a bunch. You know, there's a bunch here, some there. There was another section to the left of this. It was just full of them. And so pretty much all over where you were walking, the compacta is just up like this everywhere, at least where I was. This may be another little nobilis. I'm not too sure. It was pretty small, and for some reason I saw a bunch of bolites, some of them Strobilomyces, growing directly from the base of the pine trees like this. I mean, this is actually the bark of the pine here down at the bottom. So it's almost like it's growing from the pine, from the tree. But it's not. They're mycorrhizal, so it's probably just associated with the roots, and it found a path through the bark to come up to fruit. So you guys might have heard of like white cheese polypore, blue cheese polypore, things like that. The Tiromyces. This is another Tiromyces. It usually stains kind of like a reddish color. This is Tiromyces fragilis. I thought this one was kind of cool because I think it's the same mushroom that's on the cover of this book. It doesn't want to show my book. Anyway, I believe that's Rustula flavida. Very, very yellowy orange color on the cap. I don't know that I've ever found that mushroom, but anyway, I thought that was kind of cool. Here's some little earth tongues. Geoglossum, Trichoglossum, something like that. I didn't pick it and like examine the stipe or anything like that. And these you kind of have to get kind of close up to and to really check them and figure out what they are. They call them earth tongues. You guys know what that one is? I hope so.
Walk away.
Very good, yes. Well, you don't want to be eating that. Don't collect that for the pot. This is one of your Amanita bisporigera types. There may be a few of them, but they all contain amatoxins as far as we know. So that's definitely an Amanita. It has a vulva, has a ring on the stem, all white, white gills, white spores. Something you want to avoid.
Is that really a vulva as opposed to a swollen base there?
Yeah, if you look close, it looks like it's kind of blurry, but this is definitely like a little vulva here.
I see.
And here's the, I think this is Ignacolor. They are kind of brown on the top, but these are not. And I think Ignacolor would kind of, I mean, Tubiformis would be much browner on the top. So this is another of those little Chanterelles, fairly small. You can see it doesn't have true gills. Tends to stain this kind of dark color too. Another little Chanterelle. This is Cinnabarinus. You guys probably see these pretty often. This almost looks like it's trying to make true gills, but they, if you look close, they should be rounded. Another little cluster of some sort of Chanterelle. This does not look like a smooth Chanterelle to me, but I don't know that I would put the name Sibarius on this. They're fairly small, but they look like true Chanterelles. They don't have the hollow stem, hole in the center there. Much more yellow Hymeneum. All the Chanterelles are edible though. And another bolete. This may be Boletus griseus, but I'm not certain. It also has some dark reticulation on the stipe. It's not bitter at all. And I haven't done a spore print or anything like that, so I'm not sure if it's a Tilopolis or a Boletus. Fairly small too, not the largest mushroom. And this is at my house. You can't see it because I cropped it out, but my AC drains right here. And so this spot stays pretty damp a lot of the time when the AC is running. This is a Coltrichus cinnamomia. Kind of looks tiger's eye on the top. These aren't the best tops. I should have left one of these. These are not teeth. These are actually little pores. You look close. But the top looks kind of like tiger's eye, like those gemstone. It's got that vibrance to it.
Those look kind of moist. Are they instead dry and tough?
They are
caps?
they're pretty firm. They're tough and fibrous. If you were trying to rip it, yeah, they're not. They're wet because my AC's feet watering them constantly.
Michael Kuo on mushroomexpert.com says that he freeze dries these and turns them into little mushroom sculpture bouquets. So if you think we're obsessed with mushrooms, there's a guy taking it to another level.
They're really pretty. I love seeing these.
Yeah, they're pretty cool. They're not very big. This might be a nickel size. That might be a quarter size. And this is a good picture of one you certainly would not want to be munching on. You can even see a nice distinct green coloration to the gills right there on this one that's turned over. This is the most common poisoning mushroom in the country. Chlorophyllum molybdites, green-spored lepiota. People are eating this thing all the time. You'd be surprised.
Is it growing next to bamboo?
Maybe so.
I hardly ever find anything growing in a bamboo grove.
There was, I think the king oyster was found growing in a bamboo grove. That's, I think, I may be mistaken. All right, Nathan submitted this one. This is pretty common in this area. and pretty distinct when it comes to the little light-colored spots that tend to grow on the top. You can see the younger one doesn't really have any, but as they get older, this is very common. This is a Cortinarius ioides. So it would have a rusty spore print as well.
What is the distinguishing feature of a Cortinarius?
Well, the rusty spore print, but it's in the name of the genus is the Cortina. And so the Cortina is basically like a web partial veil. If you don't find any Cortinarius, but you find some honey mushrooms that are still fresh and starting to open and separate away from that cap, they kind of have a cottony veil as well. But they're not Cortinarius. They don't have rusty spore prints. So that Cortina is that's the partial veil, and a lot of times when the spores are developed, it's a little sticky, so they'll kind of stick to the Cortina, and a lot of times you'll see that rusty ring that's left from the remnants of the Cortina collecting the spores. So a rusty spore print is classic for Cortinarius.
Yeah, rusty brown, as
Yeah.
opposed to chocolate or dark brown or purple brown, or you got to see it. But
I don't think you can find purple brown in Cortinarius.
no. What I'm saying is there's all these browns, and I think that the rusty brown of Cortinarius is pretty distinct once you've seen it. The Cortina, if you got to catch it when it's young, and even then there may just be a few strands of it left, and it looks like maybe a spider tried to do a web underneath it. It's very, very indistinct, but for the annulus where it sticks.
Yeah, and some of them have massive lots, so it depends on the species too. Some of them there's just a little bit. I don't think there's much on this one, but some of the others you'll find it, and if it hasn't opened yet, I mean it's just super just webby up in there. It's really neat looking if you find one.
Do they also have like a club foot base, kind of like a?
Some of them.
Yes, this one does, and it can be confused with.
This one actually is more of a straighter stipe. This one isn't necessarily club shaped, from my experience. But some of the purple ones can have big, bulbous, club shaped stipes.
Oh, what is there? Is there another purple one that we confuse with the?
Ioides?
No, it's not ioides.
I mean, there's violaceous, there's alboviolaceous, there's lots of purple quartz.
There's the iodioides that apparently you have to lick the cap, and if it tastes bitter, then it's iodioides.
So lick your mushrooms.
But they were
not suggesting that. Just
right.
I found them growing in the same place as bluets. And they do kind of look similar because they have a bulbous base and they have a kind of purplish cast to them.
Yes, they can look very much like bluets,
but the spore print will be much different.
And typically, once they start maturing, if you just glance at the gills, you'll see that coloration, which will lead you straight away from bluet, or should anyway.
Thank you.
Not deadly poison, though. John Elifritz used to say it tastes like mud, and it'll ruin the entire dish if you get one in it.
This ioides? Yeah. Bill Russell said when they had ruled don't eat any Cortinarius, he's like, I've eaten so many of those ioides. Those are definitely not toxic.
There's one thing that I find with Bill Russell in his field guide. Bill Russell will eat anything. Because he also said Rustula compacta was edible, and he likes the Sarumphalina also. So he's in even the Scleroderma. So he's
What?
Yes. Yeah. So
That's supposed to be poisonous.
Well, in his field guide to Pennsylvania, He claims that he eats it.
That being said, we used to have a member who said she would get the scleroderma and she would put like a thin slice in a soup and it would be enough to give it a flavor, but not enough to upset your stomach.
That's exactly what he said in his book, too.
Okay. So this is I'm guessing that's a black walnut right there. And this should be the bottom of this mushroom and this should be the top. This looks like the skull-shaped puffball. Cyathus, either craniformis or cyathiformis. Calvacia, what did I say? Calvacia, cyathiformis or craniformis. A lot of times they look very similar until you see the spores being maturing, and then you can tell due to the color, purple or kind of a greenish, brownish color. Those are edible when they're young. This looks like some sort of gymnopus or colibia. I'm not going to put any kind of name on it because there's a lot of these little guys. They kind of have a general look. The type species in my mind would be like Colibia dryophylla, the oak-loving colibia. They look similar to this. They kind of have that look. But some of them will have, and I think this is how they separated gymnopus and colibia. One has sclerotia and grows from sclerotia. The other one doesn't. And I don't remember which is which. Maybe one of the other guys remembers that. But I think that's how they separated those. And a sclerotia is basically like a little food pod under the ground that's kind of just storing food. And at the time, when the time's right, the mushroom emerges from that. Morels actually form little sclerotia and grow from those as well. There are a number of mushrooms that do that.
Looks like that's in wood chips.
It does.
I found some today also in wood chips.
If you find stuff like this, it might be good to kind of dig up under there and see if you can find any of the little pea-sized sclerotia. And apparently you might be able to tell what species it is depending on the color of the sclerotia. You'd have to look in the books. I couldn't tell you which is which. Very common. Probably see this every foray we go on. It's Trichaptum by Foray. Violet tooth polypore. So you can see the purple coloration. It starts with kind of pores and then they change to what look like little teeth on the underside. Probably one of the most ubiquitous mushrooms. All right, a big white mushroom. Anybody want to venture a guess at this one? The problem is we don't have a scraped gill, so we don't know if any latex will be leaking out. Looks like it's a little old, so even if you did do that, you might not get much because as they get older, sometimes they don't exude as much latex. Scott, he told me they were, this was found. Are you there, Scott?
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, cool. Tell us about what you got there.
Yeah, this one's up in Booth Bay, Maine, and these were everywhere. And I was just using an app identifier, but it was looking like a short-stemmed Rustula.
That could very well be what it is.
On that small hunch, I ate a couple of those. So
Are they? The thing is, Rustulas and Lactarius are. Did you taste any before cooking?
I think I did. There was nothing milky when I cut it or anything.
So it could have been Brevipes. I haven't heard that Brevipes is very good.
I put a lot of soy sauce on it, so it was.
Oh, that's cool. The Lactarius that can look like this, there are a number of white Lactarius. This could very well be Brevipes, especially if you're saying it had no latex whatsoever. But that's a good thing to check if there's any latex. There's some in the Piperatus group that can look like this.
I think he would have known if he ate a Piperatus, though.
But this isn't a Piperatus, judging by the gill spacing. Piperatus would have so much more closer spaced gills.
This one was one of the more dramatically upward ones. A lot of them were a bit more, a little bit flatter.
Yeah, and you said that there were, did you find any lobster mushrooms?
I didn't. I was looking out for them. But this was the most common one in the area.
Yeah. Brevipes is one of its preferred hosts. Apparently it can live on some Lactarius too in the Piperatus group. But there's a bunch, indecisis, and some have woolly margins, but those would exude some sort of latex.
I have a question for the group on lobsters, since it was brought up. I actually saw a ton on a road trip to Maine a couple summers ago, and I just couldn't bring myself. I think I picked one to like show friends, like, isn't this cool? And it also helped that there were chanterelles everywhere. So that helps kind of soothe my soul about the whole thing. But the lobsters were everywhere, but I just had this like, what if it's not fully converted? What if it's eating on something that isn't good? How do you know what's enough?
I think if there's anything left of the mushroom, you'd want to leave it. But I had a very similar experience out in Oregon where I was going out and I collected, a box of chanterelles this big. I probably could have doubled that amount in the lobsters that I found. And they were, this big around, all of them, big orange things. But I was very new then. And from what I had heard, it's like you have to know what it's growing on. I don't know that that is actually the case. How would they be selling lobster mushrooms in the grocery store? They don't know what that's growing on. You can see something growing right next to it and say, okay, that's Rustula brevipes. That doesn't mean that lobster mushroom is growing on a Rustula brevipes. It could be growing on a Lactarius blah, 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 or whatever, or some other big Rustula. So I suspect whatever's happening, either they're only growing on non-toxic mushrooms or they are detoxifying the mushrooms as they digest it for themselves. Does that make sense? Kind of speculation, it's not in papers or books, but considering they sell dried lobster mushrooms all over the country, I think if somebody was going to get sick, somebody would have gotten sick. And we would have heard about it.
Would you consider eating them? Like, is that?
At that time, no, because I didn't know what they were growing on. Now I think back on it, I was like, I should have collected a bunch of those and dried them or something. I was trying to give them away to the hotel staff. I was like, I got all these mushrooms. I had so many chanterelles. I was trying to give those away too, because I was in Oregon. I was flying back the next day. That was actually one of the first sequinotas I went to, though, and I brought that tub of chanterelles that year. And we all sat there and cleaned them and ate them one night. There were actually a few white ones in there, too. It was kind of cool.
Sequinota or Nama?
It was sequinota.
Oh.
It was the year we were not at the Lutheran camp.
Oh.
So it was that year that I brought them, a long time ago. All right, and this is a very common mushroom. Some people actually have thought they might be chanterelles just because they're kind of yellow, and this one's not quite as yellow as they can be. This is another one, kind of like that Tricolemopsis Decora, where it kind of has brown fibrils on the top. And as the cap expands, they get less dark and you'll see more of the yellow through, especially right in the center here. They call this one the oak-loving Bolibia. No. The I can't remember.
This is Geronima stromboides, right?
Stromboides, yeah. Wood-loving Clitosobe. That's what it was. Wood-loving Clitosobe. It's not a Clitosobe. It's a Geronima now, apparently. So
And these are edible, is that right?
I've never tried them. I don't know.
I think the reputation is not, and they have very thin flesh. This is not a typical picture of what I find. They tend to be more separate.
These are growing in
Maybe,
mulch, it looks like.
yeah, this is not in big clumps like this. Usually on wood or coming from wood. This looks like it's on wood chips.
You said this was a Geronima?
Geronima, yeah.
Geronima, sorry.
It's okay. I'm sure I'm saying half these names wrong too.
But they can be so yellow that I also had pictures of these in not a chanterelle.
Right, yeah, they can. I mean, some people think they're chanterelles. The gills would give them away, though. If you look at those gills, they're true knife-edged gills, and they're grown from wood. So, but yeah, I've never really investigated the edibility of them. I think a lot of people have seen this one. It can be fairly common. A lot of times it can be confused for hen of the woods because of the kind of florets and the way its growth stature. They tend to be bigger in this one, and you can see this very distinctive black staining where it gets bruised. So that's the black stain in polypore. Gyroporous Stiny Eye. All right, let me zoom back out. Here's another picture of what looks like a little Jacksoni Eye. We saw those earlier. I like this picture because look at that very clear markings on the stipe. This is very classic of a Jacksoni Eye. Something like a Amanita flaviconia or something. It might have a yellow stipe. It's not going to have these orange markings on it. Also, the partial veil's orange on these and the gills.
So I have a question, because I'm not very, I know Amanitas, but I'm certainly not well versed in them. So this particular one, this is not the false Caesar, right? This is not a false.
This looks like Jacksoni Eye. This looks like a true American Caesar.
A true American Caesar, but there's also a false Caesar.
That's the like Flaviconia, Parsivolvata, Frosty Eye, things like that.
And that one is the one that is poisonous?
Not recommended for the table. I don't know that it's necessarily toxic, but it's to be avoided just in case.
You mean the false Caesars?
Right.
The false Caesar.
This one's not recommended just because of confusion possibility.
Right.
But also it's not as good as the European one, and so there's less reason to risk it.
Okay. And then we've got a Clavicorona. This is the crown-tipped coral. I don't know that. You can kind of zoom in a little bit. You can kind of see the crown tips in there. It's a big cluster of it.
The branching structure is kind of, people describe it as box-like to distinguish it from something else which is somewhat similar called stricta, which is very straight.
That's also not going to be growing from wood.
It's not? Okay.
Romaria, yeah. Romaria stricta is not going to be growing from wood. This one's growing from wood. It's kind of fractal-like, if you think about it. It's really cool.
Also edible. You got to get it when it's fresh, though. Still white. It'll get sour.
Mm-hmm.
When it turns brown, saute it really quickly. I've had it in eggs. It's okay.
And then I didn't put your name on this if you're here. Sorry. Somebody sent me a collage here. So lots of lovely mushrooms. Amanita rubescens. Oh, I had a picture of our Amanita rubescens. I forgot to put it in here. Oh, this here is an Ornatapes, and remember I was saying it can have a greenish color on the cap. This is one of the green capped ones. You got some jelly babies over there, some other Amanita, some chicken. Don't know what that is. Oysters, one of those chatters. No, cauliflower mushroom. Maybe a Lactarius here. Not sure about that. Not sure about that. Hygropharus probably. Some groovy looking bolite. That is really cool. If you have a bigger picture of that, that would be nice.
That looks like what is it, Frosty Eye? The one that was on the front
Kind
cover.
of. It looks more like one of the like Astrobolitas that have like the really reticulate stipe.
Mm-hmm.
And these could have been like a Jacksoni Eye. Not sure what that is. Anyway, that's you got a Virescens down here. Indigo, Lactarius indigo. Somebody was talking about that one before.
Anybody else in Maryland finding Lactarius indigo in Maryland?
I found them.
Uh-huh.
I found them.
Thanks, everybody. I will stop sharing my screen. Is there anybody else? Anything else? Anybody wanted to talk about?
Hey, Mitch.
Let's do more of these.
What's that?
Let's do more of these.
Okay, like that?
It was very helpful. I loved it.
Okay, cool. I'd like to do more, especially now I kind of know it's not going to be too tough to just scroll through these things. It's a good time right now to go find things. So we may do these and we'll be here for a half hour if it's dry out. But next time I'll let you send more. I requested 5. We won't worry about putting the names on them. I thought that might help. I thought I was going to do that for all of them, but I think the naming situation worked out pretty well. But yeah, I'd like to do more of these too. I'm glad you guys enjoyed it.
Yeah. As culinary chair, I'm probably going to send out an email about trying to do an online culinary, but
Super.
I'm not going to be the galloping gourmet because I can't even get a videographer. So I'm trying to figure out how to do it. And one of my suggestions would be that if you are out hunting and you find enough that you're going to cook for yourself of something that's interesting, it might be useful to share your recipe and the results of eating it and get some good pictures of kind of what the mushroom was and some of the preparation, and share the recipe if you liked it, and send me an email and I'll try to arrange it where we can kind of do a sharing on Zoom about it.
Super.
Also, before we sign off, I want to strongly recommend to everybody to come to log into next Tuesday's meeting. We're going to have a couple of really, really good lectures, especially Daniel Winkler. He's got a reputation as a very positive reputation of being a mycological savant. So next Tuesday is going to be a stellar, I expect a really memorable monthly meeting.
He's a good guy. I was lucky enough to be around when he came by the first time. So yeah.
All right. That's great. Good job,
Cool.
Mitch.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mitch.
Bye.
Thanks, Mitch.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
It was great.